Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for a presentation on the Lower American River Salmonid Habitat Enhancement Program. My name is Jessica Law. I am the Executive Director at the Water Forum. I'm here tonight with my colleague Erica Bishop, and we're excited to tell you about the upcoming project happening late this summer and early fall to protect salmon on our beautiful Lower American River. Go ahead, next slide. So we've got about 44 of you here tonight already, and we are expecting a few more. But just in terms of housekeeping, before we get started with the presentation, just please know this is a webinar, is being recorded. We have a live transcript that is available. If you click on the bottom of your screen, show captions button, captions will come up for you. And if you have any questions during the presentation, we welcome them. We're looking forward to answering some of them. So please just go to the Q&A button on your screen, share your first name and the location, whether you live in the neighborhood or you represent an organization, and then ask your question. We will answer questions at the end as time allows, and hopefully the presentation will answer a lot of the questions as we go. Okay, next slide. All right, we've got a lot of information tonight to go through. First, we just wanted to start a little bit with background about the Water Forum, who we are, why we do these projects, these important habitat projects in the Lower American River. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the Riverbend project specifically that's happening this late summer and early fall. We'll talk a little bit about past habitat projects and what we might expect in terms of outcomes. And then we'll talk about what we're doing to reach out to you and the community at large and answer any questions that you have. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, the Water Forum. So again, my name is Jessica Law. I am the Executive Director at the Water Forum. We are an organization that's been around for about 25 years. We represent a diverse group of agencies, including nonprofit, government, and non-government entities, representing water providers in the region, environmental groups, business groups, and other nonprofits working on the Lower American River. And the aim of our work is to balance water supply needs and protection of the Lower American River. Next slide. In order to do that work, we have two co-equal objectives which guide the mission of the organization. And these are a delicate balance that we've been working on for the past 25 years. One, to provide a reliable and safe water supply for the region and for our long growth and economic health. And then also preserving the fishery, wildlife, recreation, and aesthetic values of the Lower American River. Thank you. Next slide. We don't do this work alone. We have many, many partners. The Water Forum itself has about 40 members as the organization. But in particular for these habitat projects, we work with a few partners, the Bureau of Reclamation, the federal agency, also U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and then local partners as well, Sacramento County Regional Parks, City of Sacramento, SAFCA, the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency, Sacramento County, and the state as well. All right, let's talk a little bit about salmon. We're going to be talking about salmon a lot tonight, but just a refresher on why we have salmon in the Lower American River and who they are and what they do. We have two types of salmonids in the river. We have fall-run Chinook salmon and steelhead trout. These species use the river for spawning and rearing, and they're located or they're in the river throughout the year, but many of them come into the river in the fall in order to spawn. In order to survive and thrive, they need suitable water temperature and flows. They need gravel that's the right size to spawn, and they also need rearing areas to find food and hide from predators. Go ahead, next slide. These fish have been coming back to their native streams for thousands of years. And the Water Forum, as you can see, we are working with within the historic range of the salmon. That historic range, they're black, has decreased significantly because of the dams that we use to protect water supply and cities. And so really the habitat location for these salmonids has been limited to areas below the dam. So in particular for the Lower American River, we have a goal here to enhance, create, and maintain functional habitat for our native salmonids to the extent possible below Nimbus and Folsom Dam. And the need here is great, as it is all over the state. But particularly in the Lower American, mining has degraded habitat, historic mining practices, and the dams, of course, altered flows. This blocked the fish passage and vital sediment transport, meaning gravel and sand. And so really only about 10 to 20% of the historic habitat is accessible to salmonids. But since 2008, Water Forum, we've been leading improvements on the American River with support from our local, state, and federal partners. And you'll hear more about what this work is doing in order to increase habitat and protect these species. Next slide. All right, so Erica's going to talk more about this, but just some highlights of our program. Our salmonid habitat program is well known for its success, which we are very proud of, and construction marks our 14th habitat project. Funding for the projects, again, are supported by state and federal agencies, mostly the Bureau of Reclamation through Central Valley Improvement Act funds, and then also some funds from the state as well. We have been making progress on this since 2008. We've put in over 30 plus acres of spawning habitat and nearly 2 miles of side channels, and also 20 acres of seasonal rearing habitat have been enhanced. This is definitely a lot of work, but we've been doing it year by year. And we do a lot of monitoring, which you'll hear more about, to really measure how effective our projects are and how consistently the projects are being utilized by native salmonids. And other species as well, like the Pacific lamprey. Okay, go ahead. Next slide. All right, I am going to turn it over at this point to Erica Bishop, who is our program manager at the Water Forum. She is the expert on the details of all these projects and is going to walk you through some more information about them. Go ahead, Erica.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you all of you for being here this evening on a Wednesday, very hot Wednesday night. So before we get into what we plan for River Bend this year, I'll talk a little bit about the overall program, since we've been coming to the community for many years talking about these projects, and sometimes the bigger picture can be lost. So we'll spend a few minutes on this slide, and there's a lot here, but to orient you, our program sites, there are 10 right now in our salmon habitat program. And the sites range from right below Nimbus Dam, which you see over to the right side of your screen, all the way down to River Bend Park. And each of these sites were chosen because they are in the portion of the river where we generally see the best hydraulic and temperature conditions for improving habitat, where we see most of our salmon and steelhead spending their time and using that habitat. And at this point, each of these 10 sites have both that spawning component for the adult fish that are coming in to finish their life cycle, and that rearing component for those juvenile fish that Jessica mentioned. So each project site works synergistically with itself and with other areas on the river. And in order to implement a program like this, I'll talk a little bit more later on the protection of the resources, but there was a large programmatic regulatory and analysis effort that took place a few years ago to look at all of these sites and really think about what all we needed to do on the river and what made sense. And so all of those projects have been vetted through those agencies. And what you see here, you notice there are some dates next to these project sites. And some of them say TBD because we haven't worked there yet. But other of those sites, you see multiple dates next to them. And that's because over the course of Water Forum's program since 2008, we have gone from very small spawning gravel only projects to larger spawning and rearing projects where we're able to add all of the project components like woody habitat, side channels, and everything that we really know that the fish need. And so the projects have grown over time. And we started out implementing those small sites, learning from what we did learning from what others were doing on other rivers, and we can improve our designs and adaptively manage over time and construct larger projects that have grown in scope and scale, which you have seen. More recently, we have been implementing projects every year. The work that we do, the spawning habitat is optimized for the flows that we see in the river. The flows that we see in the river during the fall and early winter spawning period for our Chinook and our steelhead are guided by the water forum's flow management standard. And that really could be its own presentation, but in a nutshell, that flow management standard is it is using best available science to look at the hydrology and the flows and our watershed and recommend flows to our regulatory and operational agencies such as reclamation, NIMS, and others, where we think these are the best flows during the spawning and rearing periods, and that's what we recommend and ask for. And those depend on whether or not we're in drought or flood years, and they are refined over time. The rearing habitat that we construct is designed to be suitable over a range of flows. If you think about, all of you likely spend time on the river, you see fairly similar flows all during the fall. It doesn't change terribly much. But over the winter and the spring and the early summer period, you see the flows, they're going up, they're going down, there are a lot of changes. So we know that that is part of, implementing these projects on a managed river where there is a dam. So we are able to implement the rearing habitat where it has components that are suitable for our fish over that broad range of flows that they might see in drought years, flood years, and under normal operations. So you may ask why we're revisiting Upper River Bend now. It's been 11 years since we worked at the site. And our fish, we know that they are driven by instinct to go as far upriver as they can. As Jessica mentioned on the other slide, they used to go well beyond where the dams are now. However, they are limited to this lower part of the river, and they tend to bunch up at the top. So we see a lot of spawning activity in the Nimbus Basin and Sailor Bar area, but we have seen during past project implementation that if we are providing suitable habitat farther downstream, the fish do tend to use it, and that helps them to spread out and helps provide them a more successful spawning environment. In the past, Riverbend, the first time we implemented a project here, their pre-project surveys showed that we didn't see any reds. We didn't see any utilization of this site. However, afterward, we did see an increase in the spawning at that site and an increase in the juveniles that were using the side channel. And this site in particular, being quite far downriver, it's exciting that in certain years, it depends on the water year type, we have seen up to 40% of all of our steelhead in the river using this site. So it's a good time to come back to Riverbend. So I'll talk a little bit more, sorry, I'm getting over a cold, about what you'll see in this year's project design. This is similar, but not exactly the same as 2013, because as I mentioned, we are always monitoring our work and we're bringing in the information we collect and refining our designs. So a couple of things you see here in blue and out in the middle of the river, and that is where we plan to place our spawning gravel and cobble. We will be bringing that material in from Mississippi Bar up near Lake Natoma. The crews are up there right now sorting that material, and they are sorting it into 3/8 to 4-inch size spawning gravel and cobble that is larger than 4-inch. And that is because we know that 3/8 to 4-inch size of sediment is what works best for our fish. And that cobble is what we use to place downstream and sometimes on the side of the riffle to help hold that spawning gravel in place a little longer than it would naturally. So it does help the riffle persist a bit longer than it would under our typical flows. And the rearing area that we're hoping to touch up is actually the side channel area that you see. It's purple shading. And right now, that area has experienced some deposition. Some material from upstream has washed down and kind of choked out parts of that side channel. And so we know that that's a stranding risk on the river. And we don't want to create or support any areas where we might have juvenile salmonids getting in there during higher flows, and if flows drop, then they could be trapped. So that's part of why we're revisiting this site now, is because we know due to our monitoring and stranding surveys that this is a site where that can occur. So part of the project design, you'll see that purple line sticking out from the side channel. This is where we will deepen the side channel and increase the distance of the entrance upstream a bit. And while we're working in the side channel, we won't only just dig a new inlet. We will be also excavating floodplain benches and some other smaller channels here. What this does is provide complexity for our juvenile fish. When they come in, they don't want to just be in a fast side channel. They want to have all of these nook and cranny areas over to the side where they can slow down, they can find food, they can hide from predators, and not spend a lot of energy, fighting the flow. So we are improving those rearing conditions and reconnecting an area that is actually, disconnected right now. And along these habitat benches, we will be planting our willows. And then once we're finished with the site, we'll come in and take care of our erosion control seeding. And that does include several native species. Well, they're all native species, but pollinator and locally significant species. And we have about 1,800 willow cuttings that are going in. One thing that you will notice if you visit the site or recent project sites is that you will see woody habitat structures. Those are also being placed in the side channel and floodplain bench area, and they are not placed in the main channel flow. They are only in the side channel area, and they are tremendous for our juvenile fish. Wood is good, and there's been a long-standing tradition, or not tradition, but there were some policies that where all over the country where wood was removed from rivers. But we are seeing that change, and we are able to put the wood here. It is designed in. I'll talk a little bit more about that so that it doesn't move during a flood flow. And finally, you'll see on the spawning riffle, there are a couple of red squares there, and those are boat notches. Those are areas where at the very low flows, maybe like during a drought, we want to make sure that there is passage up and down the riffle for Sac Metro, the park rangers, and anyone who needs to provide, public safety or emergency access. And the access to the site is going to be on Rod Bowdre Drive. So nothing special there. The trucks will be coming from Mississippi Bar down Hazel, Highway 50, exiting, and then coming up Rod Bowdre and entering the project site right there before you get to the bike trail. So the bike trail and pedestrian trail will be open during construction, and access will only be limited to the area right where the trucks are driving to keep everyone safe. Great. And here there are a couple of examples. When we talk about enhancing spawning habitat, it may look like we're just dumping a bunch of rocks in the river and there's large equipment and it doesn't look terribly nuanced. But these projects are designed, they are modeled and designed very carefully, just as any other construction project would be. You see here, this is a snapshot of the drawings of the spawning riffle. And you can see here on the upstream side, this is where that spawning gravel is being placed and the cobble is being placed at the downstream. So this is all carefully delineated and specified so that our contractors know what to do on site. You see over here to the right, this is what it looks like up at Mississippi Bar when we're sorting our gravel and cobble. You see it's a mix of sizes, and that's that 3/8 to 4-inch size material. Having that mix of sizes gives us great through flow through the riffle. It helps keep the water cooler so that we can support our eggs in gravel when it's a very vulnerable life stage. They can't get away. So we want to make the conditions there as good as we can. And this graphic here at the bottom is just a cross section of the riffle. You see the spawning gravel placed upstream and the cobble downstream. Here are a couple of photos that let you know what to expect on the river when we're working. You're likely to see dump trucks bringing gravel in, loaders and bulldozers in the river, bringing the spawning gravel and cobble from the bank out to the river and grading it out to the specified elevation. You may see excavators, which are helping with some of the detailed work. And also, one way that we help protect water quality during construction is you see this photo here. the beautiful clean river on the outside of these gravel piles, this berm, and this dirty water on the inside. And you see some of that here over on the other photo where we are farther along in riffle construction. We help protect the river by starting the work from one bank, and we work our way out. We build a berm and we place all the gravel that we can behind that. And that helps keep the river clean while we're working, and helps any turbidity that occurs to stay contained, and it is able to meter and flow out in a way that doesn't exceed any of our permit thresholds or endanger our salmonids or other fish and wildlife in the river. And closer look at our rearing habitat enhancements and how we'll be able to reduce stranding in this area. So adjacent to the existing side channel, we will be excavating some of these smaller side channels and floodplain benches, like what you see here. And don't get too lost in the details on the drawings here, but one thing I'd like to highlight is our woody habitat. You see these trees, they are included as part of the drawings, and they are also, this is a photo of one at our Upper River Bend site constructed last year. So this is what it looks like when they're in place. But these are, the woody habitat is carefully designed. All of the force balance calculations that need to occur to ensure that it won't move are taken care of. And these are actually repurposed orchard trees. They're almond trees that were selected just this week. Our field engineer goes out and is carefully looking at all of the measurements and making sure the trees are going to work, and they are brought to the site in trucks. They are brought in whole, and that's how they're placed in the river, or sorry, in the side channel area. And a couple more photos about, what to expect during construction. This upper left photo is one of the 2019 project at Upper Sailor Bar. And you can see here, this is a good example of the way we construct any side channel work. Although that side channel that we're working in right now is somewhat disconnected from the river, there's always a possibility that we might have some flow through, so that we ensure that we don't have any contamination of turbidity in the river. We always make sure that there is a berm at the upstream and downstream end of the side channel. We do all of the excavation, all of the willow plantings we want to put in there, all of our woody habitat placement, all of that happens with that berm in place. Once all of our erosion control is in place, then the side channel is slowly open to help manage that turbidity and keep the river clean. And over here to the right, you see these are some of our crews last year. The woody habitat is quite securely anchored. They're using large, what are essentially telephone poles that were rejected and didn't end up being used in that way. These are keyed into the bank very far and very deep, so that even during a flood flow, that is not going to move. That secures the woody habitat in place and in an elevation in the channel, so that as the flows come up over the year, that is going to get inundated and covered, and the juvenile fish just go crazy. They love the wood, and that is where we see most of our juvenile observances. So the photo below that, you can see where once this material is placed, our field engineer is going out and making sure that the grade is correct on top of that backfill. And then other crews will come in and take care of our willow plantings and our seeding. So this year, River Bend is expected to have an in-river construction kickoff on August 12th. So a few weeks from now, you will start to see equipment mobilizing on site and getting in place. But prior to that, you might see flagging and staking out there. Please leave it in place. That is from our pre-construction surveys, and it's very important. So we expect this to take about 8 weeks for construction. And the in-river and side channel construction is going to occur before the vegetation planting and the seeding. We do that as we are working our way out of the site. The work hours are determined by county ordinances. It is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We don't have any noise before 7, though. We know that the river is very peaceful and quiet, and we want to ensure that neighbors are not hearing any backup beepers or rumbling equipment, but prior to that 7 a.m. time period. And we are able to work Monday through Saturday. However, we are doing our best and planning to try to keep that to a Monday through Friday because we know this is a busy area. The haul traffic that's going to bring the gravel in is going to take about 12 days. So it's not a tremendous portion of the project duration. It's going to be maybe 2 or 5 trips per hour, so not terribly onerous. That's coming up Rod Beaudry, and we won't have any hauling on the weekends, none at all. We will have flaggers there when we have trucks coming in and out, just to make sure that everyone is safe. There's a lot of signage there already, and there will be more, but we will still have flaggers on site. And we will make sure that our trucks are not idling or parking and blocking Rod Beaudry at all, because we know that's an area where it's a very busy road. And also a lot of people are walking and biking on that road to access the park. So we're doing our best to keep the traffic moving and not block that area. So we're working in our beautiful river, and there are a lot of measures in place to make sure that we protect the river and the people that are recreating and visiting it during construction. So I'll just run through a few of those. Part of what we do as part of our project design is a flood impact and hydraulic analyses. And there are multiple iterations of this. It's quite extensive. That's something that we have to do to get our projects approved. And it's also absolutely necessary to make sure that we have a solid design that's going to be suitable for our fish. River-friendly equipment is what you see in the river. So if you see a bulldozer or a loader in the river, that piece of equipment has been power sprayed and inspected, and its oils and greases have been replaced with a biofluid. So if there's any sort of leak or breakage of a line, that anything that is released is non-toxic to the aquatic environment. So we don't have regular equipment going in the river. It is all river friendly. During construction, we continuously sample our water quality. The American River is beautiful and clear, and that's part of why we all like it. That also means that the background turbidity, or the sediment in the river, is very low, which and the amount of turbidity that we may cause during a project is thus also very low. So we are monitoring that constantly. We have equipment in place to deal with a spill, or if we have a slump on a bank. And the water quality monitor has the authority to shut the project down and stop work if we have a water quality exceedance. And we can be visited by the water board at any time. They have visited the site to make sure that everything's happening how it's supposed to. And all of that information is reported per our permit requirements. We do have designated equipment maintenance and refueling areas, which are well away from the river. And all the erosion controls, the seeding on site, helps act as erosion control. Straw is placed when we do our seeding. And then several months later, we get to see some of the beautiful wildflowers like you see in the photo over to the right. We do have signage on the parkway near the project site, and also upstream and on the opposite bank. And that is in 12 languages. That is reflecting the diversity of our area and the diversity of the people who visit the parkway. We want to make sure that everyone understands how to stay safe and has a good idea of what to expect with the project coming online. We do have fencing to help direct people around hazards, and portions of the bank will be blocked because they're an area of excavation and it just isn't safe for people to walk there. Once we're finished with the project, all the fencing is gone, and there is no access blockage of anywhere on the bed and banks or in the river post-project. And most importantly, we do keep the river open during construction. That is something we have always been able to do, and we plan to do that again this year. It's very important for our recreational community to ensure that they can still float the river during the busiest part of the summer. So we work around anyone coming down river, and we do not work in the river on weekends or this year on holidays, so Labor Day. Another way that we're protecting the river and its various resources during construction is that we have a work window that's mandated by the Endangered Species Act. There's a lot of information on the slide, but really just focus on the green square. This is the work window we have, July 1st to the end of October. That is delineated by National Marine Fisheries Agency, and that helps us stay out of the river whenever there may be more sensitive life stages. So we're doing our work when there are the fewest incidences of any salmon or steelhead in the river. And that is when we are able to get all of it done, which you can imagine if we have a 12 or 16-week work window and we have an 8 or 10-week project, there's a lot that needs to happen so that that can occur during the work window that we have. But it is most protective of our species. And not getting too far in the weeds here, but I did mention that there are a tremendous number of agency reviews, approvals, and permits that go along with work like this. Although it is a restoration and enhancement project, we do have to ensure that we are not affecting any other resources or public safety in, when we're trying to improve conditions for our fish. So we go through all of the same permits and consultation processes that anyone else would, building a bridge, a road, or any other type of project. That includes flood impacts, endangered species impacts, ensuring that we're protective of cultural resources. And that also goes into land use approvals and budget oversight from our funding agencies. So you've heard a lot about the project and what to expect. And Jessica mentioned that we do conduct a tremendous amount of monitoring on the river. I'd like to share some of that because usually we're coming to the community to talk about construction. And there's a lot that happens during the rest of the year. So you notice that the slide previous showed us with a work window of July to October, and then what? So what I have here is a year on the river calendar, and this helps illustrate some of the habitat effectiveness monitoring, that is our fisheries monitoring, and when we conduct other physical monitoring on the river. So although construction is in the summer and early fall, there is a lot of other work happening all throughout the year. So I'll highlight some of that here. And various surveys are what you see down the left side of the screen. Those are surveys like aerial red surveys, where we are looking at our adult usage of the sites. We're looking at where the fish are spawning. Those are conducted for the entire river, not just the project sites. We're also looking at utilization by our adults of our project sites and control sites. So that is following the scientific method and testing what you're implementing against areas where nothing has been done and learning from the data that's collected. We do have snorkel and seining surveys that occur. Those spawning surveys you can see if you follow the line over to the right. Those are in the fall and winter time period. That's when our Chinook are here. And then after that, our steelhead, they are coming into spawn. So a couple of months after that, you see where we have snorkel and seining surveys. That is where our crews are out on the river looking for those juvenile fish. They're looking for those very small fish, and they are documenting their presence. They're documenting where they're, which sites they might be using. Are they using certain parts of sites like the woody habitat, and really getting great data to inform future project designs. Something else that Water Forum works on are physical conditions monitoring. And that is an all-encompassing term, but we are constantly looking at how our projects affect the river and how our projects are affected by the river. So that is looking at what changes might be occurring of the bed and banks, how sediment might be moving, how our vegetation is doing that we've put in place, and making sure that our woody habitat is still in place. There are other entities that work on the river. You notice here the carcass surveys. Those are conducted by CDFW. That is how they use the carcass surveys to consider how many adults there may be coming back that year, and they use that for other estimates. And the rotary screw trap is what you see below Watt Avenue, and that's where juvenile fish pass through that, and they are measured and documented. I mention those because although we don't conduct those surveys or collect that data, we partner with those agencies to share information. We may use some of their data for special studies and to inform our projects, and vice versa. And Water Forum also is continuously measuring dissolved oxygen, which is just what it sounds like. It is the concentration of oxygen that is dissolved in the water. That's a very important thing to measure for our fish, as is water temperature. And as we're getting toward the end of our slide deck, one thing, we've talked about River Bend and why we would like to come back to this site this year and why it makes sense. It is far downriver, and we've seen recent success at those lower sites. But bigger picture, as I mentioned, we come to the community every year to talk about these projects, and usually it is construction. I'd like to share a little bit on results. So the slide here, what you see in the last 5 years, we have built 5 projects. This will be our 6th one. So a lot of habitat has gone in the river. And the results of the aerial surveys are represented on this slide. And we'll choose one site to kind of talk about more in depth, and then you'll see the pattern and can take a look at the other graphs. So when we conduct those aerial surveys, that is aerial photography that is flown of the entire river. Most of the reds that we see in the river are in the upper portion where our project sites are. A few of them are farther downstream in areas like Paradise Beach, but we are able to get a count of every single red visible from the air. And trained personnel are doing those counts and delineating those reds. So we have a very long data set with this information. About 20 years we've been doing these surveys. So we can have a really good idea of how many reds are on the river, how many adults are using the river to spawn, and how many of those spawning occurrences are in our project sites, because we want to make sure that we are making a contribution to the wild population. So if we were doing these surveys and maybe not seeing as many reds in our sites, we may need to reconsider maybe looking at other sites. However, what we do see is that over the years, it depends on drought years and flood years. We know that there's really no normal in California, that our water is all over the place. But our program sites, as far as the proportion of all of the reds in the river that occur at habitat sites from water forum construction, it's around 30 to almost 60% of all of the wild Chinook spawning is supported by our sites. And that's really exciting. That's a huge contribution. And everyone listening this evening is part of that, because we have a tremendous amount of support from the community for these projects and a lot of interest. So I always like to share some of the bigger picture. And taking a little bit of a dive into one site, let's look at Ansel Hoffman here. And don't get too lost in the numbers. What these graphs show are a pre-project survey where nothing was built yet. It is a pre-project survey to document conditions, and a post-project survey the year after a project was implemented. The pre-project is the gray bar, the post-project is the blue bar. And you can see that at Ansel Hoffman in 2020, the year before we built our project, as far as the total number or total percentage of reds in the river supported by this site was about 3%. So not nothing, but not terribly impressive either. We say, okay, it's salmon are using the site, but not terribly much. The year after project construction, that percentage went up to about 15%. So, and that was 2021. We all know how poor conditions were in the river that year. So even in a drought year, we saw just the Ansel Hoffman site supporting about 15% of all the reds in the river for our Chinook. That same year, that site supported about 30% of our steelhead reds. So the work that we're doing and the support that we have is very important for our wild salmonid population. Oops, backwards. There we go. So finishing up, this is really toward the beginning of our coordination and outreach that we do every year for construction. We had direct mail going out to neighbors within about 500 feet of the project site. Last month, we had our members of our team going door to door last weekend to talk with folks who were home, share project information, and we are here tonight at our public info session. We have coming up briefings for elected officials and neighborhood organizations, community groups, and other agencies. That's something that occurs really throughout the project duration and after. We do have construction tours for our neighbors, so please sign up on the website if you would like to come out and learn a little bit more about exactly what's happening on site when you're seeing a lot of activity. So we would welcome you to come out. I know for me, that's one of the more fun parts of this, is really getting to share that information in the field and see it real time. It's a fun behind the scenes look. We always have news media and social media outreach and engage with the public that way. And we do have project information, basic details, and FAQs posted on our project website. So be sure and check that out. Once we get into the project, fully into construction and we're working in river, I engage directly with regional parks, our various agency staff, river concessionaires like our raft rentals, to ensure that they have a weekly look ahead to understand what to expect on the river and avoid any surprises. And I think that's it.
Right. Thank you so much, Erica. There's so much information in there. And we've been getting a lot of really good questions. I've been trying to respond to some of them on the side, but maybe we can take a few minutes now and just go through some good Q&A that we have. Sound good? Okay. So there's a lot of really good questions, but there's a few in here. So I just wanted to check back. Erica, can you just talk a little bit about the haul road within the project site? Will that road be restored back to its original, or will it be enhanced?
Yes, it will actually be enhanced. The area where actually I can flip back to that slide and give folks a visual so that it's easier to see. Just a moment. There we go. So the area where we're coming into the project site off of Folsom Boulevard will be on coming onto Rod Beaudry. So that area is paved, and then the trucks will be turning off. You see here right before the bike trail. So we'll be avoiding stopping and holding up traffic, and they'll be coming around, making a sharp turn, and then coming down to the staging area. So the area right there, especially right near the bike trail, actually right now is covered in yellow star thistle. So part of what we're going to do post-project is we're going to be restoring that area and putting our erosion control seeding down just so that we are covered going into the rainy season. And then we're going to be working over the next couple of seasons to come in and manage that site and help get rid of that star thistle as a good neighbor, being a good neighbor to regional parks, because they are always very helpful on these projects and provide a lot of great information. So we're going to do what we can to improve that. It is right next to the bike trail and a lot of people walking there, so it should look a lot better once we're finished.
Okay, great. One more question. Are contractors required to follow the posted speed limits?
They are, and they are required to, and we ask you to call if they are not. And we have had that happen in the past, and I would like to know, and I can give them a call and make sure that that happens, because we want to ensure that everyone is safe. So if you see someone speeding, definitely reach out with the project contact info, and we will take care of it.
All right, thank you. Okay, so there's a few other questions about, and Erica, you know the river so well. So there's some questions about sediment moving around and creation, especially of those gravel cobble islands. There's some curiosity. Kelly's asking, where can she access data and results of these studies, some of the monitoring that's being done. And then let's see. There was another question as well about what percentage of the rock. So, when you're thinking about those islands along the river, they've accumulated over time, enlarging, and sort of how they grow and change and fill. And Kelly also asked, what percentage of this rock comes from the creation of the spawning habitat? And, how can this be done, and sort of what do we do to monitor or study it?
Okay, a few questions there. I think to start, any of the monitoring information that comes out of our fisheries monitoring information is uploaded to the EDI public data portal. That's one of our requirements for our CVPIA grant funding. So that information, especially the more recent information, since those requirements have been put in place, it is uploaded and available to the public. We have so many reports and technical memos regarding various projects, various sites, year-to-year comparisons, and that right now is available upon request. So definitely reach out if you're curious about a certain site. we do have an internal database of information, reports, and presentations that I'd be happy to provide anything that you're interested in. And that's something that we're working on at Water Forum is if you've engaged with the Water Forum in the past, you know that over the past year, we have a new website. And part of that new website is getting all of that information up so that it's accessible to the public so that you don't need to get a hold of me for a PDF. So definitely is all available, but get a hold of me, let me know what you'd like to see, and we'll make sure that you have it. Okay. And I think there was another question there about just the river, the sediment in the river, what's happening, how we're keeping track of what's going on with the projects. So I have a couple of slides that will help explain how we're looking at the river long term. Because when we're coming to the community, we're just talking about one site or another. And it's a little in the weeds, but we'll talk through it and it will make sense. So let me just skip ahead. And I wondered if we might have questions about this, and I'm always excited to share some of the in the weeds data. So one question that we had there was, is really looking at how are you keeping track of how your projects are affecting the river and vice versa? We know that we have high flows periodically, very high flows. In 2017, that was one of those years. So part of what the Water Forum does outside of our fisheries monitoring is also looking at really at the topographic change, that is the change in the bed and the banks over time along the entire river. And this graphic, it seems complex, but really in a nutshell, if you are seeing on this graphic, orange and reddish and peach areas, those are areas where the river is eroding. If you're seeing bluer areas, that's where it is depositing material. And to orient you to this project site for orientation, the 2013 project footprint is overlain so that you can see where we worked in the past. Generally, this part of the river is eroding upstream. Many of you might know there are these lovely houses along the river here that have a very bank protection. There is concrete sometimes on the banks, and part of that is because that's a part of the river that is eroding naturally. In general, rivers erode on the outside of banks, and they deposit material on the inside or they're eroding on the outside of bends and they deposit material on the inside. So, you see those dynamics playing out in this graphic. And a lot of the material that we see coming up, eroding from the area of the river upstream of the project area is actually depositing down here at the near the side channel. So that's part of why we're coming back and touching up this area. And that's part of why we're not implementing the project in exactly the same way as we did in 2013, because this information is showing us how the river changed from 2008 to 2017 when we had those high flows. So we have better information to work with than we did when we implemented the first project. There is another area that I know is an area of concern. I heard about it from in talking with the rafting folks. There is an area of quite extensive bank erosion downstream of the project site. It's an area where if you float the river, you see some large trees falling in, and that is just natural erosion of that bank there. And we do have some deposition opposite of that, and that's where the river has changed quite a bit in this area over the years. We do know that our gravel does move. It should move. It is part of a natural process. If we placed gravel in the river and it didn't move, it would be actually very bad habitat, because being able to have some movement of the gravel is very important so that the salmon can build their redds. They actually move the gravel around themselves. And then it does erode under natural processes. So we do know that some of the gravel that we placed, or it's likely that some of the gravel we placed in 2013 will have washed downstream during 2017. However, there has been a lot of deposition downstream of that area. And in a much more extensive volume than what we placed. So part of what we do on the river, though, to keep track of all of this, because I know this is a bit complicated, but it is part of our physical monitoring. Looking at our flood impacts, making sure that we aren't, causing channel impacts. We cannot fill in the channel. it wouldn't be allowed or we wouldn't get past the floodboard. So we're looking at making sure that we're not affecting channel capacity. We're looking at the depths that we're expecting to have in the river, velocities, making sure that we are not redirecting any impacts to another area when we're designing the projects. We do go out right after the project and conduct an as-built survey. That's a moment in time in the river. And then the information that you saw on the previous slide was part of our 5-year corridor evolution monitoring, which we are actually redoing on that 5-year interval right now. So we're currently processing information collected this past winter. And that helps us really look at over a longer time span, how is the river changing due to flood events? How is it changing due to our projects? And how might we modify what we're doing in the future? And we take that into account when we're conducting our annual monitoring, and we share that information with other agencies. That was a long answer, but it's a complex question and one that we actually get pretty often.
All right, Erica, we have so many questions. So
Yes.
let's do some rapid fire here.
All right.
Can you talk about what type of fuel or diesel is used in the equipment in the river? The equipment working in the river, not the hydraulic fuels. Is it also fully environmental?
It is regular diesel fluid. It is diesel fluid for off-road vehicles.
Great. Pam wants to know, will there be educational signage installed near the work site?
Yes, we do have signage out there right now, warning folks about the project, just letting them know the project's going to be happening. And so I encourage you to check that out, and we will switch that up periodically as the project progresses.
Okay. How will these upgrades affect the Clay Bank Rapids to the west and William B. Pond?
We do not expect there to be changes to the river there. Part of why we're designing the project is to maintain the flow split between the main channel going into the Arden Maze and Clay Banks and that side channel. So we have, there is a part of the way our project elements, including the bar enhancement feature and the way the riffle is placed, is to maintain those. So I would encourage you to reach out though. If you notice changes, we want to hear about those. That's part of our annual monitoring, is reaching out to stakeholders, understanding what the user experience is on the river so that we can take that into account in future designs.
Questions about what can happen while we're in construction. Is the Riverbend area open to fishing during salmon spawning season? The concern here is that once salmon start spawning, fishermen will be able to walk right up and pick them off. Fishermen can walk in the bed. Are they allowed to walk in the bed where salmon spawn? It's a question from Jeff.
All right. Yeah. So the Water Forum, we do not place any restrictions on fishing. Those are set by CDFW. So I do know that there are, this area of the river is below the power lines. So I do believe that fishing is allowed up to a certain point. I don't remember the date since I am not fishing on the American, but we don't restrict access to the water. We do hope that people use best practices and are as protective of eggs and gravel as they can be, but that will be up to our fishermen to police themselves.
Thanks. There's a similar question from Susie. She says she's on the Ansel Hoffman side of the river. She's been to the habitat area, and this is helping her understand more. How does human activity in the water impact the habitat? She hasn't seen any signs to restrict swimming, etc.
Right. That's a good question. And, swimming is really the same. We do place project signage during construction to make sure that we keep people safe. But otherwise, this river is one of many uses, and we don't restrict access. So we do hope that that people are mindful and try not to walk in the gravel during the fall and early winter time period. Try to be careful of where their dogs are going. Don't throw rocks in the river. There are some places along the river where there are educational facilities, such as FEO Nature Center, where they do place some signage to educate the public during the spawning season. But that isn't something that Water Forum has done after construction is complete.
Okay, next question from Alan. What happens if salmon show up before construction is completed? It's a good question.
Yeah, we do often see salmon in the river, especially in the mornings, because the fall run is starting to come in while we're working. Generally, the adult fish want to avoid the noise, and they usually hang out and pass through the site in the evening. And we haven't had any issues with take or hitting a salmon because they are generally staying out of the project site when there's noise and some the gravel's moving around. So they tend to hang out where it's quiet in the evening, pass through in the early morning and overnight, and we haven't had any issues. But you're likely to see them popping, especially early.
Let's see, any question from Darren. Is there any biota expected to be disturbed and or crushed within the river native gravels when heavy equipment is used within the river channel? And are surveys being done to check pre-existing biota levels and post-construction?
So there is a possibility that there are aquatic macroinvertebrates, which are all of our caddisflies and all of those type of creatures that could be living in the gravel, and they might be affected during project construction. We have conducted, when we have had additional grant funding, maybe some funding left over, we have done some special studies looking at the aquatic invertebrates in the project sites. We hope to do more of that in the future, but it isn't something that we're funded to do every year. But yes, they could be impacted if they're in the gravel while we're working. That's part of why we try to keep the project as short as possible.
Sounds good. Okay, question from Pete. Does the work that you do need to be maintained over time? And is that why we have to come back to Riverbend? Maybe you can talk a little about that.
Yes, we have a very natural but also unnatural river. It's very natural in that we have our beautiful river flows, and it does move sediment just like an unmanaged river would. But it is unnatural in that we do have the dams and quite managed hydrology. So, and we don't have, as Jessica mentioned, that vital sediment input is really trapped way upstream now and piled all along the parkway. If you notice, there are piles and piles of gravel and cobble all along the parkway. So that's part of what we're doing with the projects, is to help reinstate some of those natural processes. But when we place gravel, it does move over time. We might have some deposition. We might have some scour in a side channel. We are monitoring the work, and we're using our fisheries field data and also our physical data to help inform us, like, it's time to come back to the site to maintain it so that it is most effective for the fish.
That's good.
And we have done so a few times.
This is similar, it's about monitoring. So this is a question from Julie. She says, thanks for the presentation. The count of reds seems to indicate habitat response, but can you explain how we monitor actual wild salmon counts on the Lower American River? Same question for steelhead as well.
So the steelhead counts are actually taken care of by reclamation, since those are our threatened species on the river. Our surveys involve whether or not juvenile or adult steelhead are using the sites, but as far as an overall count, that isn't something that Water Forum takes care of. Also, we are able to, thinking about how many salmon are coming back or what the population is expected to be is really something that CDFW does. But something that we can do as part of our projects is we can look at the genetics of the fish that are using our sites and understand, it is after the fact, how many of those fish are wild versus hatchery origin. So that's one of our special studies that we just recently completed, and I'd be happy to share that. That was recently published, so I could share that paper with you.
Okay, great. Let's see, next question. Okay, we are, let's see, okay, there's a follow-up question or temporary fencing. What are the limits? And Julie says, thanks, and she would love the study. It's contact@waterforum.org, and we can follow up with you. So follow-up question, the temporary fencing, can you better define the limits of work and whether that's the movement of equipment or actual construction? And specifically, there's concern about the gravel bar downriver of the side channel confluence with the main channel and within the fencing.
Okay, let me flip back.
Maybe we got a map for that one.
Short on time, but it might be helpful to have the map here. Okay, so yes, so we do have that orange construction fencing that you see, that is placed around the project site to help direct the public from walking through. We do periodically have folks walking through, but we do use that. It's a barrier to help people avoid the site so that they stay safe. it sounds like there was a question about what the extent of that was. We do try to keep the fence as tight as we can so that we're not restricting access any more than required. We do restrict any areas where we are excavating, where we have equipment stored, because that's a liability issue. And then in the downstream area, we want to make sure that we're keeping people out of getting into the side channel area where we're going to be excavating. So that's part of why the fencing goes as far down as it does.
Okay. All right. Let's see. We've got 2 more questions. It's 7 o'clock. We can stay on for a few minutes to answer these, but I just wanted to remind everyone, and if you need to drop off, that's okay. Just a reminder that the session is being recorded. A link to this recording will be posted to the Water Forum website under waterforum.org /habitat 2024. We'll also send an email to let you know when it's ready. And I just really appreciate everyone being here tonight. We've got some really great questions, so thank you. And okay, last 2 questions. These are good ones. Okay. Pete is curious. Just curious, when Nimbus Dam was constructed, was the idea of a fish ladder to allow salmon and steelhead to reach the water behind the dam considered? Similarly with Folsom Dam, was there ever a fish ladder discussed? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm thinking.
I am not certain. I know some of our dams included fish passage and some of them did not. And they have the hatcheries. So that is something we would have to find out more about to get back to you.
Good question. And then last one, Sarah, thanks for joining us. That was transported from the FEA area of the Lower American River during the 2023 storms. Will this large woody debris be retained and incorporated into the rearing habitat? It's, I guess, located at the upstream end of the planned rearing habitat grading area. And you're welcome, Sarah. She says, thanks for all the hard work that the Water Forum and our project partners do.
Yeah, that's a good question. Any trees or maybe a fallen tree that might be present on the site that's within the grading footprint. If there are live trees, we do some field fitting and we might try to go around them and incorporate them. Live trees or dense willow stands, we'll definitely work around those as possible because they're a great habitat already and we don't need to do anything. If there are fallen trees, we will look at the size of those and how they're, really the form of the tree and consider that for potentially adding to the woody habitat structures at splash. We always want a lot of little branches and things put in the woody habitat because it's better for the fish. So we'll definitely take a look at it.
Okay. All right, well, that's all of our questions. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. We really appreciate them. Again, that recording will go up and you can always reach the project team at the phone number that's listed there, 916-808 1997 or contact@waterforum.org. Thanks again. Have a great evening. Stay cool and we'll see you on the river.